Alright guys, in today's video we're going to be working on this AC electric fuel pump. It's a model EP12. This is an NOS part, but it happens to be defective right out of the box. And this is because of age, I suspect, but I'm going to show you how you might go about repairing something like this. But just to show you the behavior, we're going to take a benchtop power supply. We're going to put 12 volts on the feed, and you got to make sure that you know these model numbers. Some of them are 6-volt power, so you don't want to burn them out that way, but this one is a 12 volt. So we're going to do 12 volts on the power supply over here, and touching it anywhere on ground. And let me give you a view of the power supply for this test. So you guys can see it right up here in the left hand corner. And if I make contact here, we're pulling about 2.8 amps. And you can feel something going on inside, but it's not running. So what's going on here is this is seized up internally inside. These pumps are a Bellows type of fuel pump. They were actually made by Walbro, was the OEM, and then they would make them and put the AC logo on there. So that was the supplier to GM. Walbro made these pumps for other manufacturers as well. So this video is going to apply to all of the different flavors that have this same kind of cosmetic appearance. Let's go ahead and open this up, and I'll see if my suspicions are correct about what is causing this pump to be seized. Alright, so to get this apart, you can see on top here, you've got 4 Phillips screws in the center area and then 4 in the outer area. To take a look at the bellows, we're going to remove the 4 in the outer area only. We're going to be really careful not to strip these screws out, given the cosmetic condition of this part. It'd be very valuable if we can maintain that cosmetic appearance. There's a cork gasket that separates this top cover from the body. And so we're going to have to get a replacement for that as well, or fabricate one. What's under here is going to be under spring pressure. Let's see if we can get it to let go after years of being together here. Just using the plastic handle of the screwdriver to see if we can dislodge these two that have kind of seized together over the years. There we go. All right, so that side came loose. This side is still being stubborn. There it goes. All right. Yep, it's exactly what I thought. So we can see here the remnants of this diaphragm are just disintegrating. In fact, I don't know that I want to get this material on my fingers here, but you can see we just take this rag and this whole bellows assembly is disintegrated. And so the motor can't function because this is all melted up in there and is holding it seized together. Let me see if I can get this internal piece to separate here. See, if we loosen it up now, things are probably going to start moving now. See? So the pump would probably function if we put it back together without this piece. Now I need to get the plate here to let go. Let's see if we can come in here with a small pry bar. don't want to put too much pressure on it until I understand the design. I don't know if these 4 screws here may be holding this piece together. It looks like we don't need to do that. Yeah, we're just going to need to pull this decayed bellows material off of here. I think we'll be fine just doing that. So what causes this? Well, normally I would say this is caused by using fuel that contains ethanol. It's pretty widely known that the pumps of this era, the materials in them, like this bellows, are not going to be able to withstand ethanol. It's going to decay them rapidly. But why would something in the box go? Well, similarly, I think that when it sits in storage, this same material just has a tendency to degrade. So the only thing we can do here is clean all this out, get all this mush out of here, and then I'll try to find a suitable solvent to clean it the rest of the way. Again, because I'm just cautious about whether I should try to pry this plate off, because I don't know if that is related to what these screws are securing or not. It might not be, because I'm seeing the gasket here, right on the edge. This plate might be okay to give it a little bit of force to try and get it off. Let me just kind of experiment here briefly. Yep, all right, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay to take this apart. That'll let us be able to do a better job cleaning here. Yeah, so this piece is unrelated to that. We'll still need to clean the surface off. We'll still need to get this material that's inside here out as well. You can see it's just all completely disintegrated. So let me get this all cleaned up, come back, and I'll show you how you rebuild one of these Walbro Bellows fuel pumps. Just figured I'd come back here and show you getting this bottom piece separated from this plate. It's definitely adhered on here pretty solidly. Again, just due to age. All right, but that piece comes off like that. And now that'll allow us to do a better job cleaning this plate. We can see there's also some corrosion that has creeped in, even with this just sitting in the box, never used. All right, so we've got most of this gooey material removed. There's still some tarnish on this plate here, and we got most of it off of the plunger. There's still some in the middle, but before I clean any more than this, we need to make sure that this solenoid part of this motor, of this fuel pump, is still functional. So let's go back to the bench, hook up the power supply, and make sure that now less gorp is out of the way, it functions. All right, so back at the bench here, our power supply, let's set this guy for 12 volts DC. We're going to put the positive terminal on the bottom like we did originally. This piece here is the insulator. You want to make sure that this never makes contact with the housing, because the housing is going to be the ground. And then what we're going to want to do here, you could usually, put one of the mounting screws in or something to hold on to it, but I'm just going to make contact with the housing. So at that point, we saw this go in, but it needs some pressure on it to function, so I'm just going to lightly push on it. Might not have enough amperage with our benchtop supply to do this. Might have to actually hook it up to a vehicle battery. But I'm satisfied that it's functional. There we go. Give it a little bit of pressure. It's working fine. All right, so we can continue with this. It's not a lost cause. At this point, we're going to need to remove this dish piece here, get the rest of that gook out of there from the melted bellows. We're going to need to see if we can locate a rebuild kit. So the rebuild kit for something like this would be from Walbro. And I'll put some part numbers in the description. As early as the beginning of this year, they were still available. I haven't looked for one of these in a while. Let's see if we can track one down. All right, guys, it's time to come back to this project. I did finally locate a rebuild kit for this. It's a Walbro part number 300-714S. And I'll tell you this, they are discontinued or at least out of production as of 2025. So anything you find is going to have to be in the new old stock category or just left on the shelf, I would imagine. But I'm going to go ahead and take you through it. So in the box, it'll have a new tension spring. And the most important part, it'll have a new bellows. This is the part that is damaged when it's exposed to any type of modern fuel. You can't run these vintage pumps with modern fuels. You'll have to use ethanol-free fuel. It's got a new gasket. Looks like this one is just a little older, so it's cork, whereas the one we originally took off was some type of synthetic material. And then there's an instruction sheet. They talk to you right at the top about some other OEM brands from Autopulse PEG and Dupree. So AC from GM was just one of many companies that had Walbro make these pumps for them back in the day. And then they tell you in the box you should have the bellows, the pressure spring, the retainer nut, and the valve to body housing. And yes, there is a nut in here. Almost forgot about this little guy. Right, so this little guy we can actually see sitting right here. So the instructions finally give us some technical information so we can see an internal shot of how this is all put together. And the numbers in the instructions correspond to the steps as you go so that you know visually what part they're talking to you about removing or installing. And so where we got in our pursuit of this before we bought this, we had already done removing the 4 screws, and then they tell you to take caution on where the outlet and inlet goes on the left or the right. And then we can see if we look on here, reference 1, they're indicating this is the screw they're talking about versus that screw. And so as we did on this, right, so we removed this guy, we had a paint mark on this NOS pump right there. So we know that this is the orientation that the pump would go in, with this being the front and this being the back where the mounting bracket is, that the inlet is sitting here on our right and the outlet is sitting here on our left. Another way to tell is that the stamped in model number will be on the front and the production date will be on the back. In the case of this one, it looks like June 1979. So now we can proceed. So I'm going to put these pump parts back in the box for now. And we're going to proceed with these steps. So the next thing they want us to do is remove the valve housing assembly and gasket. Actually, that's part of what we already did. So reference 2 is that piece I just showed you. Reference 3 is remove the 2 screws at the bottom of the housing case. So that is where we're going to be doing something new. So that's these 2 screws here. And we want to do this carefully because the gasket that's used under here for a washer is not in the kit, so we do not want to tear it up. So I'm pushing in really hard to both not strip the head of this Phillips screw and not cause any stress to this little fiber gasket, since we don't have a replacement for it. All right, so front and back, just in case it matters. So with that out of the way, now this whole assembly can come out. Looks very, very clean inside there. I don't know if I can get that where you guys can see it. We zoom in just to give you a look what's in the housing here. So it's very clean inside there. And then we've got the unit itself. So we can see there's some type of old school electrolytic capacitor on here. Looks like, if we zoom in, a rating of 3 microfarads. But it doesn't look damaged. All right, so we've got this assembly out. Now what's next? So we've removed what they call the short pump assembly. This is the short pump assembly from the case. And then again, just in case you weren't familiar with it, they would say that that was reference 4. So they're pointing at this whole thing we just pulled out. And then the next step is to remove the PAL nut, which consists of a nylon washer, a spring, and a nylon washer from the drive stem of the armature, and remove the armature stem and bellows assembly from the coil assembly. So that looks like this guy. Just taking a quick look to see here. So this spring here was what makes contact with our positive terminal inside. Then we can see the 2 screws, the bosses on the inside of the housing for each screw, 1 and 2. You can see the light coming through right there. And so this has to be the PAL nut they're referring to. So let me get a socket that fits this. I can see one of the nylon washers. I do not see the spring that they're referring to. So if we look at the reference diagram, it looks like what we're supposed to see here is number 3. So that's the screws. So that's kind of like in line with this photo. This drawing is like showing those 2 screws that we took out are kind of like sitting in front here. That PAL nut is number 5, which is the step that we're on now. And what they're showing is I see a spring here. And then I see something going up and down. And when I look at the actual drawing, in this orientation, I do see what they're showing in the drawing with these contacts, but I do not see a spring here unless it's deep inside here. It might be embedded down below. Let's just go ahead and take it apart and find out. All right, so this looks to be an 11/32 fastener. That's a nice snug fit. But before we take this off, I'm reading ahead in the instructions, and I see down near the bottom here on number 8, and it catches your eye, attention. This is very important. It talks about depressing this assembly and adjusting this nut that we're about to remove so there's free space, the thickness of 1 nylon washer or 1/16 of an inch. And so what I think they're talking about here is the space between the bottom of this nut and this particular spring that we don't see yet. If we shed some light on the subject, I can finally see the spring. If we zoom in here, you can see there's the nut, there's a nylon washer, and there's the first coil of the spring they're talking about. And so what I think they're referring to here in this particular part of the instructions is the gap that we see right here between these two needs to be 1/16 of an inch. I think that's what they're referring to. So, if I press down on this piece here, this thing obviously moves, right? Because when we took it on the bench and we powered it up, we saw how it moves. But if I push against it and push down, right, it's just going to go back in. So I think what they're saying is at some point, we're going to push this all the way in like this. And there's the spring. All right, so now we can see that spring. Now we can clearly see this nylon washer. We can clearly see this spring. And we can clearly see the other nylon washer. Get this a little bit better in the light for you guys. A lot of shadows here. There you guys can see it now, right? So there's the other nylon washer right there that I'm pointing to with this awl. And so again, I think what they're referring to is when you end up on that step 8 and you push this in like this, and we end up taking this little nut and tightening it. I think what they're trying to say is that the slack here is supposed to be 1/16 of an inch. At least that's what I think they're trying to say. I'm just trying to get an idea at the mechanism here. I can see when we push this all the way down, obviously these points are not touching. When it goes all the way in, they do touch. I can see there's like a little fork here on a pivot. It goes down and up. And there's another spring right here that's part of that mechanism. So whenever I'm taking something apart that I haven't worked on before, I always try to get familiar with the operation before I take it apart so I can familiarize myself with what the manual might be referring to. So now, having seen that work and referring back to those instructions, when we tighten this nut back down, we're going to leave free space on that stem 1/16 of an inch. There's going to be 1/16 of an inch of play. And that should be what we're seeing right now. I mean, personally, it looks like it doesn't even have the 1/16 that it has right now. But when we put it back together, that's what we'll try to leave. All right. Let's go ahead and remove this nut. Let's see how we're going to do that. Looks like this piece is going to... Try to see if it's rotating or staying stationary. Yes, it looks like it's just going to rotate off. All right. So take that nut off. We'll take off that nylon washer. We'll take off that spring. And we got the other nylon washer here as well. And now we can take this piece out. And on the inside, there's another nylon washer and what looks like a metallic type of washer. All right. Let's go back to the instructions where we were. So we finished 5. 6 says to take off the bellows retaining nut. Turn this flashlight off so there's no glare, and remove the bellows. Well, the bellows disintegrated, so we don't have that problem, and that's why the retainer plate's already off. Bell-shaped armature plate, and clean the threads of the shaft and remove all chips and foreign material, making sure you don't score, they mean scratch, the armature if you have to clamp it to remove the nut. All right, so they're telling us take this spring off. I'm going to keep it in the orientation it came off on so I know that the big ring faced down and the small ring faced up. I'm going to take off this other nylon washer and this metal washer. And now we're going to take off this little retainer. So we're going to see if we can just get it to come off by holding this, or will we have to put it in the vise like they were suggesting? All right, so I'm able to hold it and unscrew this. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to finish cleaning the gook out of this piece, and then we can start the reassembly. So let me get this crap out of here, and then we'll come back. All right, this is how this guy looks now. There's still like some tarnish and some staining, but the plating is intact here, and I didn't want to get too aggressive because the plating is still intact mostly on this side as well. So what did I use to clean it up with? I got the larger chunks, just taking a small baby pry bar and just getting the large pieces of that black gook out of here. This tarnish and slight pitting is from water, starting to try to corrode the plating. What I did on that was I just took a piece of emery cloth and just very lightly sanded that down. And then I just came in here with a rag with some mineral spirits and got the rest of that black gook off there so it's nice and smooth and not sticky. And then I took the time to clean this armature shaft in a similar fashion. All right, so at this point we're ready to reassemble everything. So that puts us on step 7, They tell you to make sure you replace both the bellows and the pressure spring because they're a matched pair. So that tells us that we're going to take the old pressure spring and we're going to discard it, and we're going to bring the new one over. And then we're going to want to bring over the bellows. We're going to take the old retaining nut and discard it, and we're going to bring over the new retaining nut because they tell you to discard the old one. All right, so basically I think we're just going to reverse what we did, replace the bell-shaped armature plate back on the armature, place the bellows through the bellows retainer plate, and place it on the armature, and use a new bellows retainer nut, tighten the nut, loosen the nut, and retighten the nut to secure a firm seating. Check the bellows retainer plate for proper position as illustrated. And when they're saying as illustrated, they're talking about on this back here. Right, so where we're at, this piece here that is pointed to as number 8, that's this guy sitting right here. And this piece here is this guy right there. That's that nut sitting right there. This is this guy. So this is all drawn to scale. So it's very helpful. And then the bellows is sitting right here. All right, so the bellows, we're going to put this guy on. Not sure if we have, nope. Pull this off a second. This guy first. Then this guy. Right, because the bellows is sitting on top of this. Since we didn't have the original bellows, I don't have that as a reference, so I'm just kind of having to go on to it based on what I see here. And then we're going to be able to take this screw and this should help us to seat it. The screw is made of aluminum, I think, so we definitely want to be careful that we've got it threaded and not cross-threaded. I'm going to try to get this to go all the way in so I can get as much of the threads accessible here as I can for this retaining nut. So right there, if we get some light, to show you what I'm trying to do here. Right, I'm trying to get the threads to come through the bellows so we can get the retaining nut to catch. All right. All right, so almost. It's one of those kind of things where you just got to be patient. Got to be patient. And you got to just kind of do it by feel. If I feel like the threads are catching or not. Here we go. All right, and then it said in the instructions, if you recall, we should loosen it. So tighten the nut, loosen the nut, and retighten it to ensure a smooth, firm seating. So now I'm going to back it off. going to kind of move the bellows around a little bit to make sure that it's all the way down, and then I'm going to tighten it again. All right, so at this point, this piece is nice and firm, and this piece is not making any more squeaky noises like it's wanting to turn. So I can turn this a little bit, but this is fully seated, so I guess that's normal. All right. Clean the armature and inner coil sleeve prior to inserting the armature. Well, I don't really see anything on here. I mean, it is allegedly new out of the box, although I'm starting to get my suspicions now that somebody at some point may have tested this to make sure it worked, and that exposed it to modern fuel, and then it just sat in the box rotting away. That's my theory. All right. So to finish what we were doing here, we'll put the new spring on, put this metal washer back on, we'll put this nylon washer back on, we'll route this through the coil. All right, this is going to go. I'm going to take this back out again so you guys can see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to slide this through, and this green part's going to go through the coil here. It's hard to get the light. There it goes. All right, so, and we're going to thread that up like this, and then we're going to put that nylon washer back on, this spring back on. Let's zoom in here. It's too far out to see. Let me do that over again for you guys. All right, so this nylon washer back on, this spring back on, this nylon washer back on top of the spring, and then we're just going to hand thread the PAL nut on part way for now, not all the way, just so it holds this whole assembly together. Okay, and then back to our instructions here. So we just did all of this insertion. We put the spring on, we did the nylon washer, we did the shaft, replaced the nylon washer, spring washer, and nut on the drive stem, and now we're up to this part here where they want us to press this in and make sure we leave 1/16 of an inch. So the only thing I'm pausing on here is we've got this piece. And I know this piece needs to go on here. We probably should have put this on beforehand, but I don't think it matters to put it on now. That piece sits in like that. And I think this whole enchilada is part of what we need to push down when we're making this adjustment. So I'm going to hold this all in while I grab our 11/32 nut driver and tighten this down. Now, I don't want to have it stick out any more than we saw when we first removed it. So I might go back and take a look at the video and see how much of the threads were protruding, since it's not clear to me where this 1/16 free space is actually going to show up when you push all this down. I think it might mean right there. Okay. So we want to have it so that 1/16 is there, I guess. Although I don't know if that's right too. Let me go back and take a look at the previous video clip and see how many threads we had actually sticking off from this PAL nut. All right, I went back and looked at that previous video clip, and if we zoom in here, what we can see is we had 1, 2, 3, 4 threads showing over this PAL nut before we started this. And if I follow the directions and push this assembly against the point plate, and it says it wants to see 1/16 of an inch free play here, I mean, there's obviously the possibility of getting way more than that because there's a spring here. So I'm not really fully sure what that specification is, but we've got it back where it was, so I think that's fine. So now it's time to reinsert this back into the housing. This spring again has to make contact with this stud internally. This is where the positive is going to go. So if we use our flashlight now, we can see down in here, and we zoom in. It's this little guy right there that you kind of see in the center of your screen, the little nipple looking thing. This spring has got to go down on that. So if we got it in the right spot, we can use the screws to kind of help us with the alignment. I can see through this little hole that's slightly off, so I'm going to use this awl to line it up for us until we can get the screw to reach. All right, so at this point it's still not reaching. This is really more for me than you guys. I'm just trying to see if I can see this thing enough to get the threads. Okay, yeah, so we caught the threads that time. Now we'll do this side. And again, I'm just going down here and pushing on this nut that we screwed in with the flathead. Well, we're not able to grab that one. This one we've got a grip on. This one we haven't got a grip on yet. There we go. I think. All right. Now I'm going to push on it and get some force into the screw. There's no torque value given, so we're just going to try to get it as snug as we can without stripping anything. All right. Now I think we're just about done here. And then this piece here is going to make a seal with this here. You can see the witness marks from the old Bellows is right around there. So we can see that that is where that's supposed to go. All right, the only thing I'm going to do before I actually put the top on is I'm going to grab the multimeter. We're going to make sure that this is not shorted to the case. All right, we're going to take a multimeter, put it in continuity mode so that when things touch, we get a tone. And we're using a clamp here for this guy. And so when it's sitting with this all the way up and extended, it connects, but if we push it down, it stops. Just to show you another way, right? So if we show it from this direction, right? So I'm just pushing on that retaining nut. Right now, the points that I showed you earlier are making a circuit, and if I push it in, we break the circuit. So everything's wired correctly. So now we can go ahead and put the gasket back on. Now I'm taking a look at this gasket here. And again, the witness marks, looking at the old gasket, just making sure. All right, so yeah, so we can see that the bellows was sitting on top of the gasket. Just making sure. Making sure that this lines up okay, and then we're going to put the paint marks back together like we talked about. And then we're going to want to manually start these screws. 1, 2, and I can see here this little plate thing has shifted. Put it back where it goes. 3 and 4. And again, there's no torque value on these, so we're just going to snug them up. We'll use a catty corner approach, so we'll snug this guy down, and then we'll come over and grab the one in the opposite corner. Then the opposite side, and the opposite corner. And then we'll go all the way around, making sure everybody's nice and snug. As you tighten things down and squish the gasket, especially since it's a cork gasket, it will give a little bit, since we weren't given a torque value. At this point I'm satisfied. We're ready to take it back to the bench and see what it does. All right, we're back at the bench. We're going to connect the positive onto the stud. I've got this, I'm going to hold the negative here, just like last time, right? We got it set for 12 volts. And now if I make contact with anywhere on the case, she should come on and hum along by herself now. Sounds fine. All right, so this pump is rebuilt and ready to go. I hope this helps you out. This is a very vintage piece of equipment. I don't imagine they were made after the early 1980s. If you choose not to rebuild it, I will put a link in the description where you can see a aftermarket pump that's it's actually an identical copy. It's a Chinese copy of a Walbro Bellows pump. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in something like that, where you want to have just something new and you want to have it have the same cosmetic appearance. That might be an option for you. But if you really want to have it all original, what I showed you here today is the way to go. Again, no ethanol fuel. You've got to go to the tank, the pump, and you got to get the special kind of fuel that doesn't have ethanol. I'll insert a picture here, at least for Exxon, the kind of fuel you're looking for. It's unleaded, but it has no additives and no ethanol. That's the only thing that bellows is going to hold up to. If you don't follow the directions I'm telling you here, that bellows will turn to mush in less than a year, guaranteed. If you got questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below, and I'll try to help. If this did help you get your old Walbro style bellows pump operating again, I'd appreciate you paying it forward by hitting that like button. And as always, thanks for watching.